सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति।
India today, even today, is considered a spiritual country. Every neighborhood, every locality, every nook and corner of India has some religious, spiritual activity going on. Yet, there is no work culture, there is no work, forget culture. And therefore, there is no prosperity, there is no harmony. Everywhere you go, you find brother fighting brother, sister fighting sister, and money has become the god today that everyone is worshipping. And of course, there are other problems like corruption, this, that, and the other. Why is it so? Have you ever wondered? Why is it that on the one hand, there is an overdose of spirituality in a way, and on the other hand, we are considered among the most corrupt nations in the world? Because, number one, there is a misunderstanding, and a horrible misunderstanding, about Vedanta, the Bhagavad Gita, about spirituality. That it is meant for the Himalayas. That, in other words, if you want to be spiritual, you have to give up your money, your business, your vocation, your family, and retire to the Himalayas. Or that it is a post-retirement occupation. When you have nothing better to do, turn to spirituality. Or worse still, that is preparation for death. No, it's a preparation for life. Arjuna was none of these. Arjuna wasn't old, Arjuna hadn't retired, Arjuna was nowhere near the Himalayas. In fact, he wanted to go to the Himalayas. It is Krishna who said, this is your karma bhumi, you need to act here in the world. Second, it is not reinvented for the present generation. Most people study the letter of the scriptures, not the spirit. So it becomes boring. It becomes drudgery. And today religion has boiled down to just empty rituals where nobody understands. Neither the person who's chanting the mantras understands what's happening, nor the participants. And so there is no life, there is no vibrancy which spiritual life should instill, should integrate into us. And the last is, there is no technology transfer from the books into our body and mind, to our heart and soul, into our lives. What is the use of just reciting Sanskrit verses or repeating its translation and giving lectures to people if you cannot integrate this knowledge into your system? Even 2% of the knowledge is enough to change your life. So there must be a heartfelt, deep-rooted intention to live this knowledge, not just to know it. Those who did not know even a word of the Bhagavad Gita or Upanishads, many of the realized souls didn't know, but they reached there. So, we must, before we embark on the study of the Gita, we must understand what is the role of the Bhagavad Gita in our life. It is an essential aspect of our life, like salt is in food. The role of salt, sodium in life is absolutely essential. It is not just for taste. Many of us think salt in food is only for taste. It's not that. Ask any doctor, go to any hospital. The moment your sodium levels drop below a certain level, it is life-threatening. Similarly, the moment the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita, of Vedanta drops, values drop below a certain level, it is life-threatening. It already is life-threatening for us. The Gita helps us overcome challenges of life. What is the use of studying the Gita after you have finished living life? After you have been crushed by life challenges? You should learn it in childhood. In the past, children in schools were taught these values, and as they grew up, they learned to integrate this into their life, and they were well prepared to face life's challenges. Today we succumb to challenges. Every little challenge we succumb to. We become slaves to the world because we don't have this. The Bhagavad Gita confers success onto us. What kind of success? Success is a byproduct of spiritual growth. Once you enrich yourself from within, the wealth of the world will come to you, will fall at your feet. Today it's the other way around. You are falling at the feet of wealth. That's not a nice thing to say, to do. So, the Bhagavad Gita gives the formula for success. All MBAs in the world should first learn this in order to be successful. The Gita gives the technique of enjoyment. We don't know how to enjoy the good things of life. Science and technology has given us a fantastic world to live in. The scientists have given us enhanced objects of enjoyment. But nobody has taught us the technique of enjoying them, which the Bhagavad Gita gives. So that your enjoyment never goes down. It remains high right through your life. Relationships. By the time you start a relationship, problems start, and you're on a downward spiral all your life. The Gita gives us the technique of establishing wonderful relationships so that the days of wine and roses do not become days of wine and neurosis. The Gita helps us to tap into our potential. The best among us tap into barely 3% of our potential. What about the rest? It's untapped, it's unknown, it's unsuspected. This is because right through your life, in every experience, you have the choice of operating out of one of the 4 components in you: body, mind, intellect, or Atman, spirit. Because we don't know any better, most of us operate out of the body, the weakest, the least potent of our personality. So there must be this growth to higher enjoyments, growth to higher potential through mind, intellect, and ultimately to the spirit. And once you get to the spirit, you achieve miracles. There's a verse in Sanskrit which says, Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim. The power of Atman is such that it can make a mute person speak eloquently and a lame person climb Mount Everest. That is the power that is inherent in each one of us. The beauty of the Bhagavad Gita is that it is not a knowledge that is exclusive to the privileged classes. It is open to all. It addresses all human beings and says, Every human being has the potential to get to perfection, and gives the various methods for different kinds of people to get there. So for which you need to invoke the power of the Spirit. Inspire yourselves with something higher. Most of us are living at the physical and material level. Get inspired with an emotional feeling, and then you break through the limitations of the body and come up with magnificent performance. Sports persons have been known to continue playing with fractured thumbs, fractured arms. Very painful, but they've done it because they're inspired to do it for a parent or a coach or someone else. Move from the emotional to the intellectual. Scientists who are on the verge of an important discovery forget about their own emotional needs. They forget about even hunger. They rise above both physical and emotional and come up with stellar performances. Now, up to here, we can at least visualize. But the spirit is something that is unknown to us. You have to be able to stretch your imagination, extrapolate, and imagine what it must be like to have no barriers, to have nothing holding you back, to have nothing weighing you down. Look at us. You wake up in the morning weighed down with worries and anxieties. You say, oh, this did not happen yesterday, and I don't know whether this will happen today or tomorrow. We are constantly weighed down. Imagine what it must be like not to be weighed down. The closest example to this is a child. Whatever happens around the child is brimming with enthusiasm, activity, cheer, dynamism. Recently a family shifted and there was upheaval, there were inconveniences, there were so many other things. All the adults were affected. Everyone got into a bad mood, except the child. The child was still full of beans. This is an indication of what it must be like to function out of the spirit. So, there must be that desire to get there. There must be the feeling that I must someday break free from my limitations. And then the journey begins. The Bhagavad Gita speaks to us about laws of life and living. It gives insights that empower us. Before the aeroplane came into being, the early airmen took contraptions that looked somewhat like the bird on top of a cliff and simply jumped. They were not in flight. They were in what we call as free fall. They were unsupported objects hurtling towards the earth at a dangerous speed. But at that time, they didn't know it. It felt good. They thought they were in flight. And suddenly they looked down and they realized that they were about to die and finished. They were crashed. This is what happens to us when we live life without knowing the laws of life and living. Disillusionment seems far away. For the moment, selfish activity, shortchanging others, cheating others, being hurtful to people, doing wrong things, feels good at the moment. But it is exactly like simply jumping off a cliff. And that's what we are all doing. Because we don't know the laws. Once you learn the law, learn to respect it, learn to abide by it, the same law which is the cause of destruction today because of your ignorance, now becomes, through knowledge, the pathway to excellence, for which you need to expand your mind. Have a vision. What is vision? Think beyond the immediate present. All of us are imprisoned by the present. Small, petty thinking. Think beyond I, me, myself. That imprisons you still further. You've cocooned yourself into a prison where you can't think beyond yourself. Understand one thing. You can't achieve greatness with small minds. You must expand your mind, enlarge your vision, and identify with a larger goal. That there are others apart from me who live in this world. And when you're exposed to, when you expand your mind, you're exposed to higher things, it's so exhilarating, so energizing. You come up with creative ideas. You create prosperity and success not only for yourself, but for others around you. And ultimately, you grow. So, now to come to this portion, the last 19 verses of chapter 2 begin with Arjuna's question in verse 54. Arjuna has listened to the highest knowledge that Krishna has given from verses 11 to 53. He's hardly prepared for such mind-boggling knowledge. But Krishna gives it to him as therapy because he has broken down, laid down his bow and arrow, and refused to fight. So Krishna blasts him with the highest knowledge in the hope that he recovers. And in verse 54, when he asks the question, remember one thing, from 11 to 53, Arjuna is silent. He hasn't said a word. The fact that he's asking a question in verse 54 means there is recovery. But this recovery is only partial. Because the question he's asking is, who is a perfect person? What is the definition of perfection? Which, although interesting and useful to all of us, is irrelevant to Arjuna in his condition. Arjuna should be asking, what should I do now? He's placed bang in the middle of a battlefield. The recovery is only partial. Still, Krishna goes all out and answers this question brilliantly in the next 18 verses. So, verses 55 to 59, the perfect person is defined. Then in 60, Krishna comes back to our level. What is our position? We are fighting the world in a way. So the first thing that happens is, the senses are senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, are attracted by sense objects of the world. So the senses first go out into the world. These senses drag the mind away, is what verse 60 says. The next thing that should follow is that the mind which has been dragged away by the senses now pulls the intellect away. But he doesn't say that. Verses 61 to 66, he gives the importance of the intellect. Before saying that the mind drags the intellect away, he tells us how important this intellect is. Buddhi nashat pranashyati. If you function in the world without buddhi, there is sure destruction waiting for you. That mind which has been dragged by the senses now pulls the intellect away, which means there is total destruction. So he's highlighting the importance of sense control. That is the very first step in spiritual life. If you can't control senses, you can't proceed any further. And the conclusion in verse 68, tasmat, therefore, restrain the senses. And 69 to 72, he gives a brilliant definition of perfection and how to get there.